about to experience, Jackson Snyder presents. Direct from the Vero Essene Yahad, a Hebrew Nation radio original program. JSP is a variety show seeking out Jewish and Christian origins, religion, theology and history, and doing so in a fashion that is both educational and entertaining. Welcome to Jackson Snyder Presents.
The headline: Possible home of the Ark of the Covenant exposed in Israel. Archaeologists in Israel may have uncovered a link to the lost Ark of the Covenant, which has been the subject of so many books and movies. They have possibly uncovered a temple with a stone where the shrine once rested. This structure could have immense implications for the authenticity of the biblical story. Israel archaeologists were digging just outside the city of Beth Shemesh, near Jerusalem. They've been working on a site that dates back to the 12th century BC, and it's on a tell or mound. It seems likely to the researchers that one of the structures uncovered at this site was used as a temple. It's perfectly square, measuring 28 feet by 28 feet, and it opened with a bima, a platform used for religious ceremonies, according to Haaretz. Inside the possible temple, they found two large round stones, which appear to have had grooves or gutters cut into them. The Daily Mail states that the grooves on the stone mean that they may have been used for libations of wine or for creating sacred wine from olives. Animal bones and fragments of pottery found here would indicate that the area was used for rituals. The Daily Mail quotes Professor Shlomo Bunimovitz, who participated in the dig. Quote, "When you look at the structure and its content, it's very clear that this is not a standard domestic space, but something special." Unquote. Also found in the structure was a large stone resting on some smaller stones, and it's very reminiscent of a table or a dolmen. The Jerusalem Post quotes Dr. Zvi Lederman, who led the excavation, as saying that, quote, "At the beginning we thought it was a masabah that had fallen over." A masabah was a cultic stone used by Canaanites and other groups before the coming of the Israelites. This was something that the experts had not seen before and was an enigma. However, it's similar to the structure upon which, according to the first book of Samuel, the Ark of the Covenant rested, according to Haaretz. Now, if you want to see the pictures in this article, you need to go out to my YouTube channel, which is youtube1.org. Obviously, I can't post pictures on a podcast. This could be a remarkable discovery if proven correct, because people have been searching for the Ark for centuries. It was a movable shrine that was believed to hold the commandments smashed by Moses when he came down from Mount Sinai. It was the holiest relic the Hebrews possessed, as it symbolized the covenant between them and Yahweh, but it was lost during the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem in 458 BC. The Bible states that the Ark was first placed in Siloah, near Jerusalem, after they had expelled the Canaanites from the Promised Land. It was captured by the Philistines during a battle, but Elohim chastised them with a plague, and it was returned to the Israelites, who placed it at Beth Shemesh. Here it stayed for some years before being moved again, before it was finally taken by King David to Jerusalem. The description of the large stone upon which the ark rested and the fact that it was placed in Beth Shemesh could be evidence that the archaeologists have unearthed the place where the shrine was once kept. However, there are those who caution against this view. For example, in the book of Samuel, the stone upon which the ark rested was located outside a temple and not inside the sacred space. It's generally accepted that the Bible was written after the 12th century BC, and it provides us with the folk memories of the Hebrews. Haaretz quotes Bunimovitch as saying that it's not easy to figure out what people remembered and what was added later. unquote. This means that while the table may not correspond directly to the biblical description, it doesn't mean that it was not used to hold the sacred ark. Moreover, the table may have been used by Canaanite worship before the coming of the Israelites, and the story that it was used to hold the ark was a later addition. The Jerusalem Post quotes Abraham Faust, a professor of archaeology, as stating, quote, "This find might support the theory that there are some very early traditions that made their way into the Bible," unquote. During the excavation that led to the discovery of the temple, the archaeologists had to dig through a strange, dark material. It was tested, and it was shown to be 3,000-year-old dung. In the mid-12th century, the place was overrun by robbers and destroyed, leaving it covered in animal dung, reports Legit. It appears that the temple was captured by possibly the Philistines, who used the temple as a stable, and leaving the sacred place in such condition could have been a deliberate insult to their enemies. Sadly, the discovery of the table probably will not provide any clues on the present location of the Ark of the Covenant, and the role of this stone structure and its connection with the ark will remain very controversial. However, the find is very important as it offers an insight into the development of the biblical tradition. By Ed Whalen. Next, the missing contents of the Ark of the Covenant. What was inside the ark? Not just the Ten Commandments. Whenever the subject of ancient technology comes up, most people have been conditioned to spectacular movies and TV shows to think right away about the Ark of the Covenant. Some say it was a capacitor of some kind, a powerful source containing a communicator with which to converse with ancient aliens. Others insist that it was a weapon of mass destruction. Fantastic claims have been published describing beams issuing from it that destroyed entire armies, although those claims are not found in the Bible. The ark is also said to have been the place where the Ten Commandments were kept. But if you read the passage quoted from the book of Hebrews and parallel passages from Exodus and Numbers, you soon realize that's only part of the story. From Hebrews 9, 1-5, the first covenant had regulations for worship and also an earthly sanctuary. A tabernacle was set up. In its first room were the lampstand, the table, and the consecrated bread. This was called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was a room called the Holy of Holies, which had the golden altar of covenant. Above the ark were the cherubim of the glory, overshadowing the atonement cover. Of course, I believe in Hebrew, the holy place is called the Kadosh, and the Holy of Holies called the Kadosh Kadoshim, and sometimes you see it written that way. The book of Exodus tells us that when Moses climbed Sinai to receive the law, delivered to the Israelites after their escape from Egypt, he was instructed to build an ark upon which the glory of Elohim would rest. Ark comes from the Greek word for chest. A covenant is a binding contract or a legal agreement. When the original Hebrew texts were translated into Greek, forming what is now called the Septuagint, that is the Greek version of the Hebrew Bible, or the Christian Old Testament, the translated words carried over into our English versions of the Bible. Hence, the Ark of the Covenant was originally meant to serve as a religious symbol of Elohim's contract with the Israelite people, not a technological marvel or weapon of war. I think the generic meaning of that word ark is just simply a box. I've looked it up before. Yes, well, that's what it says next. It was a box, about 2.5 feet high and wide and 4.5 feet long, made of wood, covered with gold leaf, and transported by means of 2 long poles that ran through rings placed on its side. When not being carried about, it was housed within the Holy of Holies, the inner sanctuary of the tabernacle, or tent of meeting. During the 40 years the Israelites were said to have wandered in the Sinai desert. After the conquest of Canaan, it was placed in a sanctuary at Shiloh, and was later brought by King David, it is said, to the site of the future temple at Jerusalem, built by King Solomon. This was the occasion that so inspired David that he danced before Yahweh, much to the disgust of his wife. By the time the Babylonians destroyed Solomon's temple in 586, the ark had disappeared from history. Although many have tried to find it, its location has remained a mystery. Some think it resides in the temple in Ethiopia, brought there by the son of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. I think that's been debunked. Others believe it is hidden in the caves of Qumran, buried under the Temple Mount, or even hidden in a booby-trap pit on Oak Island off the coast of Nova Scotia. Most scholars believe it was destroyed. Many doubt it ever existed. But doesn't it say in Jeremiah that it was actually buried at the base of a mountain? I know in Israel there's one particular base in a mountain that's heavily guarded. You can't even find it on Google Earth. It's missing. Though most people who have watched the History Channel or read some of the spectacular articles about the Ark know that it housed the Ten Commandments, there were actually two more symbolic objects that were alleged to have been within the Ark. Exodus 16 and 25, along with number 17, emphasize all three items equally. 1 Kings 8, which describes the ceremony when Solomon brought the Ark into the temple, mentions only the Ten Commandments. Apparently by then, some 500 years after the Ark had first been constructed, the other two objects so important to the original authors had either been lost or forgotten. What were they? And why were they so important to the story of the original Ark of the Covenant? I think probably 9 out of 10 people that listen to this broadcast can tell us what the other things were. Each item placed in the Ark recalled stories found in the biblical books of Exodus and Numbers that, when taken together, represent the very essence of early Judaism and predate the essential Christian message by 1,000 years. Taken together, the three objects symbolize a powerful religious statement. Now, the first object was, of course, the stone tablets containing the Ten Commandments. These represented Elohim's law, Torah, but the people had broken Elohim's Torah. While Moses was on Sinai receiving instructions that forbade the worship of idols, the people were down below dancing around a golden calf. The tablets, therefore, would forever symbolize the people's rejection of Elohim's Torah. The second object was a pot of manna. Manna literally means, what is it? When the people needed food in the desert following the exodus from Egypt, the texts tell us that Elohim instructed Moses to have them go outside and gather a daily supply of a light bread that formed with the new dew each morning. Only a day's supply could be gathered because the bread would spoil if it was hoarded. Whatever was gathered on Friday would keep for the extra day so that people would not have to break the Sabbath commandment forbidding work on the seventh day. When the people went outside on the first morning to discover the miracle of Elohim's provision, they saw the bread and said, "Manna? What is it?" The idea was to teach the people to trust in Elohim's provision. This event later prompted a famous Christian petition, "Give us this day our daily bread." I just think now, with a little conviction, if these people were forbidden to even pick manna on the seventh day, how might that compare with our seventh-day observances? We've gotten quite far away from our ancestors in the observation of the Sabbath. After the novelty wore off, the people complained, longing for the good old days and the leeks and onions of Egypt. So manna came to represent their rejection of Elohim's provision. The third item was Aaron's rod that budded. Aaron, Moses' brother-in-law,
according to this article anyway, I think it was Moses' brother, not brother-in-law,
had been selected by Elohim to be high priest. But the people wanted to elect their own leaders. The texts tell us that they complained to Moses, who passed the word on to Elohim. So Moses was told to have each tribe select a candidate for high priest. Each would place his rod or walking staff in the ground to be inspected during the next morning's convocation. The rod that budded or took root would indicate Elohim's choice. The implication was that Elohim's leaders bear fruit, while earthly leaders do not. Of course, Aaron's rod produced a bud, and he went on to become the first high priest of Israel. But whenever the people thought about the staff in the ark, they would be reminded of their rejection of Elohim's leadership. Good article. Now, those are 3 things. Did you remember them all? On the cover of the ark stood the mercy seat. 2 carved angels, one on each side, with their arched wings meeting in the middle, symbolically looked down at the ark's content. There they saw rejection. Rejection of Elohim's Torah, Elohim's provision, and Elohim's leadership, as represented by the 10 Commandments, the pot of manna, and the staff. That doesn't leave a lot more of Elohim left to reject. But on one day a year, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, the high priest sprinkled the blood of a sacrificed lamb on the mercy seat. On that day, the symbolic angel icons would see not rejection, but the blood of the innocent substitute, and the sins of the people would thus be atoned. This was a central religious symbolism called Substitutionary Atonement, later adopted by Christians who saw Jesus Christ as the sacrificial Lamb of Elohim. Much speculation has arisen over the true meaning of the ark, because the Bible makes a special point of saying Moses' face glowed when he came down from Sinai after talking to Elohim, and because Moses was later said to have worn a cover over his face when he came out from the presence of the ark. Some have speculated that it contained a source of light, perhaps even radiation, which might explain his premature death before he even entered the Promised Land. Radiation poisoning. It was said that in the presence of the ark, Moses would hear the voice of Elohim. This has sparked tales of it being a transmitter through which Moses was in contact with ancient aliens, using details supplied from their blueprints to build the ark to their specifications. Because of the ark's supposed ability to inspire armies in war, and because at least one man is said to have died after he touched it without proper consecration, speculation arose as to its mystical or military powers. But a careful reading of the texts casts doubt on Moses' face glowing. Instead, the Bible seems to imply that Moses' face wasn't glowing at all, and that caused him such embarrassment that he covered his face because he thought it should glow. After all, he had just supposedly been in the presence of the Elohim of light. The Ark of the Covenant is surrounded by mystery. If it existed at all, perhaps it still awaits discovery, resting in its 2,500-year-old hiding place. But its basic meaning to the Israelites was clear and should be clear to us after this reading. The Ark reminded them of their contract with Elohim, who they felt chose them to be a special people. It was, plain and simple, a religious symbol that they carried before them into battle, much as the Crusaders carried a cross, or armies carry their flag. It served as inspiration. According to the Bible, there were no death rays, no secret communications from on high, at least not from any source known to the biblical writers, and certainly no Indiana Jones-type curses. That's not to say that curious stories about the ark don't surround its mythology. In 1 Samuel 5, the Philistines, just a generation before their champion, Goliath, had his famous confrontation with David, the shepherd boy. The Philistines had the misfortune of capturing the Ark of the Covenant. They recognized that it was a holy object, even though it belonged to the enemy, so they decided to put it on display in the temple of their god, Dagon. One would suppose that it was a "my God can beat up your God" kind of thing. But that's when the trouble started. Every morning when the priests of Dagon went in to do whatever it was they did each day, they found that their statue of Dagon had fallen on its face on the ground before the ark of Yahweh. What to do? Following the age-old ploy of passing the buck, they decided to move the ark to a different village. But those folks didn't want it either. After 7 months of enduring this kind of religious version of musical chairs, the Philistines finally sent for their priests. They decided to put the ark in a cart along with a guilt offering. It's kind of like a kind of sorry about that present. Hitch the cart to some oxen and send it home to Israel. When they set off, the oxen, on their own with no guidance, went straight up towards Beth Shemesh, keeping on the road and lowing. The Hebrew commentaries usually say singing or humming instead of lowing, and lowing all the way. They did not turn to the right or to the left. Persistent stories eventually grow into a mythology, but is there enough evidence to say that the Ark of the Covenant was really an example of ancient technology? As always, we have to come to our conclusions. But when we read the original text first, rather than simply accepting what we see on television, they seem to point to a powerful religious symbol that, when viewed in its entirety, provides a basis for a three-pronged metaphor that has been ensconced in the atonement doctrine for two of the world's great religions. The message of the Ark of the Covenant seems to be that people may reject Elohim's law, provision, and leadership, but Elohim has nevertheless atoned for their shortcomings. Whether or not we personally accept this religious doctrine in a historical or even metaphorical way, it seems to offer a hopeful message in troubled times. I should say it does. It's a message to modern times especially because of the great religious profligacy of our day, the fact that people are in no way disciplined, nor do they have any respect, and most of the world has no provision either. People need Yahweh. People need the Torah. I'm completely convinced of it. Had we Torah as the law of the earth, what problems we would be dealing with would be petty, because that law is far-reaching. And even if it doesn't talk specifically about modern things, modern technologies, modern crimes, there are for sure types of behavior that can easily be transposed to find an answer to just about any moral or physical situation that we find ourselves in. That article was by Jim Willis. Next, the Ark of the Covenant, a weapon, a throne, a temple. And this article is by Cam Ray. The Ark of the Covenant, also known as the Ark of the Testimony, is one of history's most intriguing ancient mysteries. According to biblical sources, it was constructed after Moses had freed the Israelites from Egypt in the wilderness, and items of spiritual significance were placed in the chest. The ark would serve as the observable sign of Yahweh's presence to the Israelites until it went missing after the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem in 587 BC. According to Exodus 19, 5 and 6, Yahweh made a covenant with the Israelites, and I quote, "Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people. For all the earth is mine, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests, and an holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel." It was believed this covenant brought about the construction of the ark. Another reason for the ark's construction was political. The Israelites believed Yahweh to be their king, and by building it gave them ability to transport their monarchy wherever they went. This also made the ark a military weapon. If Yahweh was their king, if Yahweh was their El, then he was their commander, which made the ark a weapon. I think it was always the general that was up in front of the armed forces in battle in those days. I don't know about a weapon as much as one that should be followed into battle. Therefore, the Israelites needed a symbol that they could look to, and it put fear into the minds of their enemies. You have been listening to Jackson Snyder Presents on Hebrew Nation Radio. Jackson Snyder Presents will return after these messages.